Hey guys, Saf here with another Raid Shadow Legends video. Today is the first Legendary Blessing Spotlight that I'm releasing, and it is going to be on Brimstone. Brimstone is probably one of the most talked about and one of the best Legendary Blessings, specifically for PvE, dungeon, and high-end content. We're going to be looking at this blessing in detail, breaking down exactly how it works, looking at the behind-the-scenes information so you know exactly what you need to do to activate it, and some of the quirks you may not know about it, especially to do with some specific dungeon bosses and the way that it works. So without further ado, let's get started. So we have Brimstone. Brimstone is a legendary blessing, which means only legendary champions can use this blessing. When you're building a team, you probably want to look at trying to pick one of your legendary champions to have this, not necessarily your main damage dealer if you have multiple legendaries, because the stats you gain from this are not necessarily matching with what you would want on a damage dealer. So what does Brimstone do? Whenever this champion attacks, each hit is an important word, each hit has a chance to place a Smite debuff for 2 turns. Champions under the Smite debuff will be hit by a meteorite when they use an active skill. So the first thing I want to say about this is each hit basically means it's not per skill. Think of War Master versus Giant Slayer. This isn't the War Master effect where it rolls once. It can roll on every attack if you're a multi-hitter. If you're an AoE, there's a chance to roll on each individual ability. So the more enemies, the more likely you're going to get this out, for a better word. Champions under the Smite debuff will be hit by a meteorite when they use an active skill. Active skill basically means it cannot be a basic skill. It can't be an A1. So this won't work if a Spiderling attacks, because a Spiderling doesn't have any active skills. It won't work if the clan boss stuns you, because that is an A1 ability. It's actually quite difficult to activate it on many of the Hydra heads, because some of them don't like to use their active skills. Think in Mischief head, you provoke the Decay head. So if you get unlucky and they go on those two, you don't actually get this activated. It has to be an active ability for it to activate the debuff. The meteorite inflicts damage equal to 25% of the champion's max HP. Ignore the word champion. That really should say target's HP, because it works on bosses as well as champions, and will also inflict damage to all other enemy targets equal to 5% of their max HP. So it's kind of like that hex thing where you hit someone and then everyone else takes a little bit of damage. This is going to work a similar way. Only one Smite debuff can be active per team at any point. It cannot be removed, blocked, resisted, or transferred. So this is what we are calling at hh.com a team blessing, because really you only want one on your team. Once that debuff is activated, you can't activate another one, so you're wasting a blessing slot. It does have a 4-turn cooldown, but that's generally not a problem because it will go on for 2 turns. So if you think of the way that the process would work, I place the debuff. I've now got 3 turns to take before I can place it again. The boss has to take 2 turns before I can replace it anyway. So effectively, I've only got 1 turn to try and get that back. As long as I'm running reasonably fast, taking multiple turns potentially. Think of a Clan Boss 2-1 environment, a Hydra where you're boosting yourself through it. As long as I'm getting back to that in a reasonable amount of time, I'm probably going to not worry about that cooldown at all. In terms of the stats you gain for this, it's more of a debuffer stats, which would make sense. You're applying a debuff. You get 6,000 HP, 50 accuracy, and I think 10 speed for a legendary champion. This obviously doesn't matter if you're an epic, because an epic cannot wear it. So this is going to be the max you can get. At 2-star, you get 5,000. At 4-star, you get an extra 1,000 and the 50 accuracy. And then you get 10 speed at the 6-star. In terms of awakening, the actual level of your champion for Brimstone is far less important than, say, Crush and Rend, like I did in the last video. What you're getting here isn't better potency, it's better frequency. So we're talking about more star awakenings equals more chance to apply it, means more consistency, more uptime. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be up a lot, because as I said, it's per hit. So as long as you have multi-hitters with this or you're doing AoE, it does actually get placed quite quickly, even at 20%. I've got my Ninja at 20%. Ever since they bug fixed it, if you didn't catch my patch notes video a couple of days ago or yesterday, I can't remember exactly which day I released it, they did have a bug where this ability was going on cooldown even if the debuff wasn't applied. They've bug fixed this now, so it only goes on cooldown when you actually apply it. My 1-star ninja applies this pretty reasonably that I notice he has it on. Same as my Jintoro in Clan Boss. I notice it going on, so therefore I'm not struggling. I'm fortunate that I've got a 5-star Cantra that I can test this on, amongst other legendary blessings, but at 5-star we're at 70%, and then at 6-star it's 100%, but it's the 10 speed you gain really. So what does Smite do? It says Smite deals 25% of the target's max HP, which is true for most champions, but bosses treat this differently, and we're going to just quickly break down on a screen exactly what that means. So Brimstone Smite is a debuff. It is protection mode 1, which means you cannot influence this debuff in any way at all. You cannot extend it, you cannot transfer it, you cannot stop it, you cannot block it. If this debuff gets placed, it gets placed. Let's talk about what it does. 25% of the target's max HP, as we know, and then we get 5% splash damage, but it will ignore all defense and it is fixed damaged, which means you cannot increase it by weaken and you cannot affect the damage. It is basically fixed in its current number. The bosses were actually given unique passives specifically to deal with Smite. It's not an unintentional effect that the Smite does damage to the bosses. They specifically coded it to support Smite. Clan Boss will cap Smite at 250,000 damage on all difficulties. Hydra will cap it at 100,000 on all difficulties. Dread Bombs in a Bommel encounter are immune, which makes sense. They're immune to everything else. And then all of the bosses, they basically reduce this damage by 70%. So it will scale on different HP levels. Spider 25 will take more damage than, say, Fire Knight 25. Fire Knight obviously would never take a turn, versus someone like Dragon, who would take less damage as well. So it'll scale based on their HP. It's basically reducing it by 70%. That's how Smite works on all bosses and all difficulties. It is insanely good for just raw damage. The other thing to note about Smite, specifically with Iron Twins, the Smite debuff can proc Iron Twins passive. Unlike Ice Golem, Iron Twins passive is activated by direct damage, poisons, HP burn, or Smite debuff. So keep that in mind. It's only Geo's passive effect, not the burn itself, but the passive damage reflect component that doesn't activate it. So now that we know what Smite does, what should we do with it? I 100% recommend that any team you run, if you can get a legendary blessed champion, to basically have Brimstone in that team. And we'll see why now when I run some different scenarios with my Cantra. So the first thing to obviously take it into is, we could probably take it into a Hydra encounter. I'm just going to throw in some champions here. We're going to throw in that. We're going to throw in, let's see, some defensive champions here. This is not a proper team. I'm doing it for testing purposes. Let's throw in maybe a block debuffs so we don't get some nasty debuffs here. Where's my Asura? There we go. And just throw in some healing here with Brogni, just so we stay alive and we get a turn. Okay, so what we'll find with Cantra is 70% chance. So pretty much with 4 enemies here, there's a pretty good chance she's going to land at least one of them. So we're just going to take a turn. Now the problem we've got in this rotation is if it lands on Mischief, he will never do any of his active skills, which he only has one of, until he steals a buff. So we don't really want to land on him. We're going to provoke probably the Decay head here. So really we're looking to try and get that Smite debuff on these 2 heads. I actually have a consideration when I'm going to be looking at Soul Reap that I don't think Brimstone is necessarily the best legendary blessing for this encounter. But we're going to see how it goes now. We're going to just do this and we should throw this out. Okay, so we got the blessed one there. I actually need to just provoke here now, so we should be able to slow it down and see this in effect. Once we get some turns, obviously the slowest head here got them. We're probably going to have that stolen. That's not a problem. And you should see the splash damage occur in a second once the suffering head takes a turn. It's a bit undesirable that 2 of those heads got Poison Cloud, but there you go. Just throw that over here. Okay, so we're going to get the poisons out. Eventually, the Suffering Head is going to take a turn here, and we should see the Brimstone proc in a second. Okay, here we go. So it's going to proc on the first turn here. Smash, loads of damage, 100,000 there on that champion. And proc again for another 100,000. So you can see the power when it lands on the right head there. We're up to 1.4 million because of basically Brimstone. If I run this again, and we don't get it on the champion that we want, we'll probably see that it doesn't actually activate and we just waste it. So again, we're going to set this up. We're just going to get some abilities out. We're going to run that provoke there. Throw it out there. So we landed on this head this time, which is still okay to do so. So it's a bit of RNG. if we end up getting it on the other two heads, we never activate it. So again, we can run this through. We can see that it'll do lots of damage. So at 594,000, we're just going to run it through and see how much one actual proc does for us. Get a provoke out there from Cantra's passive, which is great. We're just going to throw this out here. Cycle some turns. I think the next turn the boss should take a turn. He's going to do his thing, and then we should get one more turn with about 938,000. This will probably take me up to about 1 million. So you can see there, the Brimstone didn't actually fire off the Smite debuff because he used an A1, not his A2, for some unknown reason. To me, it must be a rotational thing. So we actually lost a proc there. So when you talk about this encounter, you're basically going, can I make sure that I get this Smite debuff back out? Now, we did talk about the fact that Cantra would be on a 4-turn cooldown for Brimstone. So we'll see here that she's taken enough turns that I can probably just apply this almost instantly when I take another turn. The next A2 that I have, which is here, I should be able to reapply Smite. I haven't there. I've got unlucky, so we've got to rotate back around. Now, the good thing, obviously, with Cantra having this, she does have an A1 ability, a single target. If there is a specific target that I want the Smite debuff to be on, not the other two heads, I can focus my Brimstone on this. So if I hit this target, I should get a Brimstone activate. Excellent. But he, again, I don't think he's going to use this A2 if there are no poisons out. So it's very difficult to essentially activate this Brimstone ability on certain heads. Really, the Suffering is a great head to do it on, always does his abilities. Mischief, if you're not controlling it, won't work. If you're provoking the Decay head, won't work. Torment might be an option, but I am led to believe in Hydra that maybe Brimstone is not the best one versus another Blessing at a higher Awakening status, but certainly having one on your team cannot hurt for the damage we deal. Like we'll probably see here when we rotate back around, it's not going to fire again because he's not going to use his A2. He's going to use his A3 because I've got block debuffs up. I haven't got any poisons on me. He's not going to use that ability for whatever reason. Just extend these buffs continuously. There we go. Didn't use it, used his A1, we didn't get the Smite. So that's the really important thing you need to remember. If the enemy doesn't have an active ability, you cannot activate it. Let's show that off as well in Spider. So if I decide to run this team here, I'm just going to throw in Cantra, and we are going to look at what we can do. So this is normally my nuke team. Obviously, I'd be one-shotting the boss here, but I'm going to fire out the A2 here. I could target the boss, then it would be great. But if I target the enemies and I don't land it, it's now on this guy over here. So I'm going to single target the boss for a second, and we're going to see if that target, when he takes a turn, is not going to Brimstone anyone because he doesn't have an active ability. We'll just throw this out here. And again, there can only be one Smite out at any point in time. So until that Smite is consumed, there you go, no consumption there. I can't reapply it. So that's something to keep in mind if you're bringing an AoE Brimstone into places like Spider. It's very powerful on the Spider Queen. It'll do about 434,000 damage, but it won't work on the Spiderlings. So there you go, guys. That is Brimstone. I would highly recommend this goes on every one of your team. I think I've said that about 3 times now. It is a good, accessible way to make your debuffers do damage for your team. It will add quite a lot of damage. If you think of a clan boss unkillable setting, you get 50 turns normally. Out of that, you'll have 33 A2s and A3s. So as long as you line up your Smite debuff in the right place, you should have around about 250,000 attacks. And when we do the math on that, it's quite considerable. It is about 8.3 million damage to your clan boss team. This is like adding War Master to your champion all over again and boosting it a little bit more. So definitely recommend Smite on your legendary champion. If you look at my clan boss team here, I've been slowly getting the awakenings and blessings needed for the champions. I have got my Gintoro with my only legendary with Brimstone. My goal is to get cruelty on my Seeker, which I don't think I've done the blessing spotlight for cruelty yet, but cruelty on my Seeker because you can ramp it up pretty quickly. And then Demitha will probably have an aura, I would imagine, that I will get for a little bit more attack. So you can see how I'm setting up my team to maximize the value of the blessings. Let me know in the comments below if you have really found some value in using Brimstone. I know a lot of people put it on a champion for Iron Twins, and that got them a lot further along in trying to speed farm that if they don't have a Geomancer. I will be doing more Blessing Spotlights. The next one I'm going to be doing is changing up Cantra and doing Soul Reap. I'm really interested to see how that works in PvE settings as much as PvP. Definitely for Brimstone, the Awakening level is not as important, but I think Soul Reap will be much different. So with that said, keep an eye out for those upcoming videos, and I will catch you in the next video.